Adiz was a 32-year-old Nigerian woman living in the UK with her husband, Cheka. She was the definition of humble beginnings, a part-time cleaner in a supermarket, quietly hustling and saving every penny she earned. Life in the UK hadn't been easy for her. She had no family here, no close friends, just her husband, Cheka, the man she had followed from Nigeria after their wedding. Cheka, on the other hand, was a proud man with big dreams but little patience. He jumped from job to job, always chasing the next big thing, but never committing to anything long enough to build stability. Despite their struggles, Adiz remained loyal, believing marriage was a bond to be nurtured, not abandoned. One cold Saturday evening, after cleaning the floors of a shopping mall, Adiz stopped by a corner store and decided to buy a scratch card with the little change left in her pocket. She had never believed in luck, but something in her whispered, "Try." And that was it. She scratched it right outside the store, under the pale streetlight, and screamed. She had won £30,000. Adiz couldn't stop smiling. Her hands trembled with excitement as she stared at the lottery ticket in her purse for the 100th time. £30,000. It still didn't feel real. She had barely slept since the win. That evening, she rushed home with her heart pounding, desperate to share the joy with the man she loved more than life, her husband, Cheka. "Cheka," she shouted the moment she entered their modest flat. "God has remembered us, oh. God has finally answered our prayers." Cheka, lounging on the worn-out couch with a beer in hand, looked up lazily. "What is it?" Adiz could barely contain herself. She held up the scratch card and practically danced around the room. "I won the lottery. £30,000. At first, he looked stunned. "You're joking." She shoved the confirmation email into his hands. He scanned the screen, eyes widening. "Jesus," he breathed. Then, without warning, he jumped up and grabbed her by the waist, spinning her around. "Adiz, you're not just my wife, you're my destiny helper. God bless the day I married you." They laughed, they danced, and they prayed together that night. Adiz, overwhelmed with joy, knelt before him and said, "Let's use this money wisely. Maybe we can buy a small house back home or invest in a food business like I always dreamed." But Cheka had other plans. Over the next few days, he insisted on managing the money. "Babe, I'll open a business account," he said. "I know how to handle things better. Let's not make any mistakes with this blessing." Though hesitant, Adiz trusted him. She always had. Soon, the changes began. A brand new Mercedes appeared outside their flat. Cheka started dressing in expensive designer clothes. He bought the latest iPhone, a gold wristwatch, and began hanging out with businessmen she had never met before. "Is this really necessary?" she asked one evening as he strutted in wearing Gucci sunglasses, indoors. "Adiz, you don't understand wealth," he replied with a sneer. "You think it's by saving every penny like a church mouse? This is how you move in high places." Adiz began noticing receipts and bank statements she didn't recognize. All accounts, even the one her winnings were deposited into, were in his name. When she asked about it, he brushed her off. "You're my wife," he said coldly. "So technically, the money is mine too." Then came the biggest shock. One morning, Adiz woke up to an eerie silence. Cheka was gone. At first, she thought he had stepped out. But by noon, she knew something was wrong. His clothes were missing. His phone was switched off. The Mercedes? Gone. The bank account? Drained. She searched every corner of the flat for a note, a message, anything. Nothing. Just like that, the man she gave everything to had vanished, with every last kobo of her winnings. Adiz collapsed on the cold tile floor, weeping. The betrayal burned deeper than the theft. She hadn't just lost money, she had lost love, trust, and the future she had dreamed of building with the man she once called her king. She went to the police, but they told her there was little they could do since everything was in his name. "You trusted him," the officer said with a shrug. "That's not a crime." People she confided in gave her two types of advice: move on, or go back to Nigeria. But Adiz wasn't the type to run. She wiped her tears, stood up, and looked at herself in the mirror. "They've taken everything from me," she whispered, "but I still have me." That was the moment something inside her changed. The broken woman began to rebuild. The days after Cheka's betrayal were a blur. Adiz stopped eating. She barely spoke. Her world had collapsed, not because of the money, but because of the man who was supposed to love and protect her. The walls of their tiny flat felt like prison bars now. Every corner reminded her of the life they had started to build, or so she thought. His laughter still echoed in the halls. His scent still lingered on the pillows. But he was gone. Gone with her heart. Gone with her trust. Gone with her future. She would stare at the ceiling for hours, asking herself the same questions. Was I not enough? Was I too naive? Why did he do this to me? But there were no answers. Only silence. And pain. Then came eviction. Cheka had stopped paying rent months ago, using the money to fuel his selfish lifestyle. Adiz had no idea, until the landlord came knocking with a court letter. She was given 2 weeks to leave. With no savings, no family, and no one to turn to, Adiz packed her few belongings into black garbage bags and moved into a shared women's shelter. Her once quiet nights were now filled with the cries of other broken women, each one carrying her own version of pain. It was in that shelter, surrounded by trauma, that Adiz began to see herself again. She wasn't alone. One night, an elderly Nigerian woman at the shelter named Mama Bisi sat beside her. "You've been silent since you came," the woman said. "Let me guess, a man shattered you." Adiz nodded slowly. Mama Bisi chuckled softly. "They always do. But you know what they can't take away." "What?" Adiz whispered. "Your mind. Your strength. Your second chance." Those words stayed with Adiz. Like a seed buried in darkness, something inside her began to grow. She went back to work at the supermarket, scrubbing floors with red eyes and blistered hands. Some of her co-workers whispered and laughed behind her back. They had seen the Mercedes, the flashy clothes, and now she had returned with torn shoes and tired clothes. But Adiz no longer cared. She was done impressing people. Her only mission now was rebuilding herself. She enrolled in night classes for a nursing assistant course. It was hard, balancing work, studying, and healing from heartbreak. There were nights she cried over her books. Days when her body ached so badly she could barely move. But she never gave up. Every time she felt like quitting, she would remember that night on the floor of the flat, clutching her chest, unable to breathe through the betrayal. She promised herself then that if she ever rose again, it would be for her, not for anyone else. 2 years passed. Adiz completed her studies and passed with flying colors. She got a full-time job at a major hospital in Birmingham. For the first time in years, she had a stable income and a sense of purpose. She moved into a decent flat, not luxury, but hers. She bought a small car, not a Mercedes, but paid for in full. And she smiled again, not because of a man, but because she had survived what was meant to destroy her. She even started volunteering at the women's shelter where she once lived, mentoring other women, especially African immigrants, on how to stand on their own feet. People began calling her Nurse Ada, the woman who rose from the ashes. But even with all her progress, one thing remained undone. She never saw Cheka again, until the night fate brought them face to face. It was a cold winter night, one of those nights when the wind howled like a warning and the rain fell in angry sheets against the hospital windows. Adiz, now known to many as Nurse Ada, was halfway through her night shift at St. Mary's Hospital in Birmingham. The emergency ward was unusually quiet, giving her a rare moment to sip lukewarm coffee and flip through patient charts. Then came the announcement over the speaker. Code Blue. Male. Late 30s. Unconscious. Suspected alcohol poisoning. ETA. 2 minutes. She rose instinctively. There was no room for emotion in her job. She had handled everything from gunshot wounds to overdose cases. But nothing prepared her for what was about to happen. Moments later, the ER doors burst open. 2 paramedics wheeled in a motionless man on a stretcher, soaked from head to toe. His clothes were filthy, his skin pale, A deep gash above his eyebrow was still bleeding. A homeless man, one of the paramedics said. Found collapsed in a public restroom. ID card says his name is Cheka Obi. Adi's world stopped. The chart slipped from her hand. She stared. The man on the stretcher, unrecognizable beneath the grime and weight loss, was her husband. The same man who stole everything from her. The man who disappeared without a goodbye. The man who left her for dead, now lying barely alive before her. She swallowed hard. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the ghosts of a past she had buried. The nurses gathered around him. They didn't know. To them, he was just another patient. But to Adi's, he was the unfinished chapter in a story she had promised herself she'd never reopen. Vitals are dropping, another nurse said. Adi's forced her body to move. She stepped forward, her voice calm despite the storm inside. I'll take him. She cleaned his wound. Inserted the four. Adjusted the oxygen. Every touch was clinical, efficient, cold. But inside, memories came flooding back. The nights she begged him to stay, the mornings she waited for him to return, the pain of finding herself abandoned and penniless. Hours passed. At 3:42 a.m., he opened his eyes. Confused. Weak. Disoriented. He looked around the room, blinking slowly until his gaze fell on her. His brows furrowed as if he was staring into a dream. Adi's, he croaked, voice barely a whisper. Her name in his mouth made her skin crawl. She didn't smile. She didn't move. She simply said, "You're lucky to be alive." His eyes filled with tears. I didn't know where else to go. I messed up. You didn't come here, she said, stepping back. You were dragged in like the broken man you are. Chaka's tears streamed freely now. I lost everything. After I left you, things went bad. I got scammed. Friends turned their backs. I started drinking, sleeping under bridges. Adi's, please. Please what? She cut in, her voice firm but low. Please forgive you? Please take you back? Please fix you. He nodded weakly, unable to speak through his sobs. Adi's took a deep breath. You know what hurts most, Cheka? It wasn't the money. It was the betrayal. I would have given you that £30,000 freely if you just asked. But you lied. You vanished. You left me for dead. He closed his eyes, shame painted across his hollow face. She continued, her voice softer now, yet sharper than any knife. But I didn't die. I rose. I found myself in the ashes you left behind. And the woman standing here today, she doesn't need you anymore. Silence fell between them. And then, she walked away. Later that morning, she referred him to a rehab shelter with food, counseling, and temporary housing. She didn't hug him. She didn't exchange numbers. She didn't even say goodbye. Some might call it cold. But for Adi's, it was closure. She went back to her flat that evening, sat by the window with a cup of tea, and watched the sunrise. Not just over the city, but over her life. The days after the hospital encounter were strangely peaceful. Adi's thought she would feel rage, vengeance, maybe even pity. But all she felt was peace. A calmness she hadn't known in years. She had seen him. Broken. Battered. Alone. Not because she wished him evil, but because life had a way of teaching lessons in ways the heart could never imagine. And sometimes, the best revenge was success. Quiet, unshakable, undeniable success. Weeks passed. Cheka remained at the shelter Adi's referred him to, undergoing detox and therapy. The nurses occasionally mentioned how grateful and quiet he had become. Adi's never asked for updates, but the universe wasn't done with their story just yet. One crisp Saturday morning, Adi's was invited as a guest speaker at a women's empowerment conference in London. Her topic: Turning Pain into Power, the journey from betrayal to breakthrough. She stood before a crowd of over 200 women, many immigrants like her, many survivors of abuse, heartbreak, abandonment. Wearing a tailored emerald suit, her hair in a sleek bun, and a poise that radiated resilience, Adi's shared her story, from sweeping supermarket floors to sleeping in shelters, from tears on tile floors to triumph in hospital corridors. He took everything from me, she said, her voice strong but calm. But he didn't know I was everything. He left with money, I stayed with purpose. The room erupted in applause. Some women cried. Others nodded in awe. But behind the crowd, unseen, stood a shadow. One no one had expected. Cheka. Thin, bearded, dressed in modest clean clothes, he had come quietly, escorted by a counselor from the rehab home. He stood there, hands folded in front of him, listening. Tears streamed down his face as he watched the woman he once discarded now being celebrated like royalty. After the event, he waited near the exit. Not to beg, but to speak. Just once. She stepped out, surrounded by volunteers and journalists, when she saw him. Her steps slowed. He stepped forward gently. "Adiz," he whispered. She looked at him. For the first time in a long time, she really saw him, not as the man who broke her, but as a man broken by his own choices. "Thank you," he said, voice cracking, "for saving my life, even after I destroyed yours." She sighed. "I didn't save you, Chaka. You saved yourself by surviving long enough to be found." He nodded, silent tears falling. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added. "I just wanted to see you shine. And you did." Adiz looked at him, the man who once danced in Gucci and spat poison with pride, now trembling in humility. And she smiled, not out of spite, but from a place of power. "I already forgave you," she said. "But I'll never forget the lesson. Sometimes the ones who bury you don't know you were a seed." She turned and walked away, not bitter, not broken, but reborn.